Before we turn the page and consider Yahowah's Torah testimony, I'd like to make a comment on two things that were said during the news break. The president wants to punish Assad. That's what he said. We have to punish Assad. You know, turning an individual into an enemy worth punishing is something that very simplistic people do. Now, we know for certain that Assad did not order this chemical attack. We don't know if it was perpetrated by one of his units or by the Syrian rebels. That is unknown. It may even be unknowable. But we know for certain that Assad has said no every time that anyone has requested the use of chemical weapons. So why do we want to punish Assad? Why did we want to punish Gaddafi and justify bombing? Oh, we got to punish Gaddafi. He's bad, bad, bad. Oh, we need to invade Iraq because we need to punish Saddam Hussein. We need to invade Afghanistan because we need to punish bin Laden. When you are that simplistic and you don't understand the big picture, you have no concept whatsoever of the consequence of your actions or the fact that you don't have moral standing, by justifying stupidity based upon such base moral concepts as we need to punish Assad, Gaddafi, Saddam, bin Laden, you're almost always going to make a bad situation worse, just as we have each time. The idea that that kind of strategy prevails. And I remember when we first invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, how 90% of Americans came to rally behind the military and their president and said, bad guys, we're doing the right thing to depose them. And all of the calls were, bad guy. And look at the mess we made. It's time that we grow up. That known, we have Jaime calling in from Colombia, South America, has a question regarding ties. Hello, Jaime.
Yeah, hello, Yada. How are you?
Good.
Well, thanks for the call. Well,
sure.
I listen to you all the time. I have downloaded all of the archive files on a daily basis. I go to sleep listening to sections 1 and 2 and everything, and I just enjoy your program tremendously.
Well, thank you.
And I see it much better than, well, I don't really listen to the main news, including Fox, which is better than the others, but still, I don't really listen to any of them. I listen for your program to get the update on what's happening.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to, I got several questions all along the line, or comments. In relation to the war in Syria, what's coming out lately here is that in the last 10 days, is that what this is really all about, and I haven't heard you mention it unless I've missed it, is that it has to do with the Qatari natural gas pipeline that's supposed to go to Syria, okay? And they want to get control, the U.S. wants to get control of that pipeline, okay?
Let me speak to what I do know for certain.
Okay.
The Afghan war, that George Bush's bombing of Afghanistan had all to do with the pipeline. That the reason that the United States decided that it needed to engage in Afghanistan is that the largest oil and gas reserves in the world are in the Caspian Sea area. It is landlocked, and at this point, only the Chinese and Russians have access to it, which is why the Chinese and Russians have formed alliances with Iran, and that's why China and Russia are allied with Syria. We will never disgorge them from that alliance because of the value of the pipelines to the Caspian Sea. Now, so why do I bring up Afghanistan? There's a book called Crude Politics, and I wrote a great deal about this myself in the Islamic Terrorism Timeline, which you'll find at the prophetofdoom.net site, that we wanted to do the same thing the Pakistanis wanted. The Pakistanis created the Taliban expressly to control Afghanistan because the Pakistanis knew that if a pipeline was built through Afghanistan, it would come through Pakistan, and they could tax the revenues of the oil and gas moving from the Caspian Sea area. And that was how they were going to get their cut. And so it's the reason, crude politics, is the reason that we invaded Afghanistan. So if you recognize that has been proven, and now you move forward to Syria and you say, all right, now that we have desire to get that same gas, which is controlled by Iran, to a free water port, and we failed miserably in Afghanistan. In fact, almost all of the initial battles in Afghanistan were designed to free the western part of the country where that pipeline was going to go, and they built the roads, and as they were trying to build the roads, which you have to support the pipeline construction, the Taliban just absolutely hammered them. As a matter of fact, there were negotiations with the Taliban in the White House, right up to the precipice of that war, telling the Taliban that if you capitulate on the deal that we have cut to have the pipeline there, we won't bomb you. But if you don't capitulate, we will bomb you. So now, where do you take the pipeline to a free water port now that you can't use Afghanistan and Pakistan? Syria. And now that Iraq and Iran are no longer at war, but we gave Iraq to Iran, you go right through Iraq, from Iran through Iraq into Syria. So is the premise of it credible? Absolutely. Would we be so despicable that we would bomb and kill hundreds of thousands of people because of our crude lust for oil? Absolutely. Yeah, so I can't tell you it's for certain. I can tell you that we have a history of doing it, and in the past it has been shown that it was certain.
Right, it plays a factor in this. It's not 100% all of it, but it definitely plays a factor like why we're going to war.
Yeah, I would say that the single biggest factor in our desire to engage in the Syrian war, and this president said we're not going to war because our troops will not be harmed. Well, if shooting cruise missiles and firing and dropping bombs on a country is not declaring war on them, then we really need a new definition of war. No, we're just really going to spank Assad with billions of dollars worth of bombs. It is the real reason that we want that this administration wants to bomb Assad is that the United States wants to support the efforts of Qatar and Saudi Arabia for a resurgence of Sunni influence in the Islamic world, and to thwart the rise of Shia influence that we created. So if you really want the main reason, get right down to the primary reason, it's that the United States government is now on the side of Sunni Islam because of our alliances with Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the others.
Right, it is a religious war when it really comes right down to it.
The war in Syria is absolutely a religious war. It is what Yahowah said when he said that they will be wild asses of men, speaking of Ishmael's descendants, and Muhammad claimed to be a descendant of Ishmael. Islam is based upon Ishmael. He said they will be wild asses of men, their hand will be raised against their brother's hand against them, and they will live in hostility with the whole world. We are seeing the first three aspects of that statement being manifest in Syria today. It is a religious civil war, and there is nothing that any country in the world can do to resolve that.
I mean, that continues in all of the Middle East overall. Definitely. Some have more reasons than others for the U.S. to intervene, like in Libya, for example. That was about oil, but it was also because, in my opinion, from what I read, because I'm online all the time, 15 hours a day, while I work, and I'm also looking at the political stuff, etc. Right. In Libya, it was also to get that country back underneath the Rothschild Federal Reserve Bank, which Gaddafi had pulled out of. He was no longer using, and had taken his country 100% out of debt. And they couldn't put up with that. And then Iran naturally is also out of the Federal Reserve System of the Rothschilds. That also is a reason
I'm not quite as prone to blame the Rothschilds. Currently, I mean, certainly they play a negative role. But if you look at the countries that wanted to bomb Libya, they were the first countries to sign petro deals with the jihadists that we empowered, and they negotiated more favorable petro deals. Italy, France, the United Kingdom, and the U.S. companies all negotiated more favorable petro deals with the jihadists than they had with Muammar Gaddafi. And so there was a direct, and they didn't even wait a minute. I mean, literally as we were bombing, we went to the Mujahideen that were opposing Muammar Gaddafi and negotiated these deals, which were immediately empowered upon his death. So, there's a direct correlation between crude politics once again and wars.
Yeah, because you look at Sudan and Yemen, which has no oil, etc. They butchered what I think Sudan is 2.5 million people. Yemen is 800,000, and there hasn't even been an outcry in the Congress for that.
Of course not.
I had called, just so you know, some of the congressmen and senators this week, because I am doing that on this particular case. I don't do that all the time, expressing my opposition against this war. And it was interesting. I asked them that question. I said, in relation to Sudan and Yemen, I said, why aren't we attacking them? Oh, they didn't use gas. And so I made the comment to them, okay, so it's okay to butcher in any way, shape whatsoever, behead people, burn their churches down with people in there alive. It's okay to do all of that. As long as you don't use gas, go ahead and butcher the 2.5, and man, we're not going to do anything. But if you kill 10 people with gas, we're going to come in.
Yeah. Oh, well, not if you're our ally. If you're at al-Nusra Front and you kill people with gas, then we're just going to we'll blame the other side until evidence proves that we can't blame the other side, and then we'll just ignore it.
Yeah, and in this war here so far, with so much on the net, there is no 100% solid proof under any circumstances that Assad has used it. But his gas, but it's exactly to the contrary. But since that's not the issue, they just need to attack, like you said, for the reasons you're saying, political, the crude oil. That's what it's. They just need an excuse, no matter how flimsy it is.
Right.
They just want something.
Yeah. Okay, Jaime, you had another question?
Let me ask you about tithing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A question on tithing. I became a Christian back in '84 and was a Christian for basically about 3 years ago when I came into the Hebraic root movement. I guess you can call it Messianic, etc. And I always tithed as a Christian, and when I came into the Hebraic roots movement, I also continued to do my tithe. But I've come across people that are in the Hebraic, but they say that tithing is not for now because there is no Levitical priesthood and because there's no temple. And therefore, that we don't need to tithe in any way, shape, or form.
Jaime, when we come back to Shattering Myths, I'll speak of both not only the tithe but also the Hebraic roots movement and Messianic Judaism as well. I hope to answer your questions. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Jaime brought up a three-part question, actually 4 parts. One is Hebraic roots. Another is Messianic Judaism. The third is Christianity and tithes. And now, is there such thing as a tithe that we should be concerned about? So here are the answers in order, Jaime. Hebraic roots is only valuable if by Hebraic you mean Hebrew in the sense of the language. If it means anything more than Hebrew in the sense of the language, then it is misguided. Yahowah's Torah, prophets, and Psalms are written in Hebrew. Hebrew is a very unique language. For example, only in Hebrew are verbs emancipated in time. No verb is stuck in time in Hebrew, and that is profoundly important when trying to understand Yahowah's teaching. And because the meanings of Hebrew words are misconstrued in our English translations, taking the time to study the etymology of the terms that Yah used is essential if we want to know who he is and understand what he's offering. So if you are moving towards an Hebraic understanding, then that is a very good thing. If you're part of a movement that has religious connotations to it, be very careful. What I have seen in terms of the Messianic Judaism is typically a blend of Pauline Christianity with rabbinical Talmud Judaism. It takes elements from both religions, and it makes a disgusting mess. You know, to take two wrongs does not make a right. And so I would strongly encourage folks to avoid Hebraic roots when Hebraic roots is seen to be the same thing, a blending of Pauline Christianity with the rabbinical Talmud. If Hebraic roots means I'm going to get to the root meaning of the words as God shared them with us in Hebrew, then by all means that is a wonderful direction to move in. Now, let's move to the tithe in Christianity. Purely and awesomely hypocritical. Here's Christianity based upon Paul's letters denouncing the Torah. They say the Torah is law. Now, Torah doesn't mean law. It means teaching. They say that it's law that nobody can obey and that no one can be saved and that it's completely annulled and it no longer has any merit. Except if it's about money, and that if we can take that one statement about money and apply it to ourselves and enrich us.
Correct.
Talk about hypocritical. You know, you walk into a church, what's the first thing they're asking you for? Your money.
Money.
Yeah, and they always talk about it as your tithes and your offerings. So the tithes is they want 10% of everything you make, and then they want your offerings on top of that. It is repulsive is what it is. It's how people, it's why God hates religion. I mean, he goes in Yahowah, which is written to us Gentiles, and he says, man, why is it that so many people, accept religion? Everybody that's involved in religion is got their hands out. They're trying to deceive you so that you pay them. I mean, God's really upfront about this, and that's precisely what's happening. Now, I'm going to share with you I think the single most insightful comment that Yahowah makes regarding the concept that is translated tithe. You'll find it in the book of Korah, which means it's an invitation to be called out and meet with God. It's Leviticus 23:17. He's speaking of the festival feast of Shavuot, which is the promise of the Sabbath. And he says, you should come bringing out of your homes 2 loaves of bread as an ascending wave offering, a double portion for a tenfold enrichment and empowerment. Now, if you read your English Bible, it's a double portion for a tithe. Now, a tithe is 10. So you tell me how a double portion, 2 loaves of bread, 2, can be a tithe. You think that that home over the course of the year produces and consumes 20 loaves of bread, where the 2 would be 10%? No, of course not. And so you look at the word, this is why Hebrew makes so much sense, is you look at the word isharon. Isharon is a compound of esher and of ashar. Asher means 10 and tenfold. Asar means to enrich. And on is empowerment and growth. You know, yesterday's program, on Friday, we were talking about the Shabbaton and what the difference between a Shabbaton was and just the Shabbat. Well, it's growth and empowerment through the Shabbat would be Shabbaton. Well, in this case, it's Isharon. This is a tenfold enrichment that empowers us and enables us to grow. And so what God is telling us here is that he doesn't want 10% of what we make. He wants to empower us. He wants our attention, our invitation to this meeting to enrich us. We'll return in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We were just talking about the tithe. The last part of your comment, Jaime, was also germane to this discussion. The when Yahowah said that he would like a free will offering and wanted folks to bring in some wood, some sheep's wool, and the like into a storehouse, and during that time, that and leaving a portion of the fields unharvested, so that what you created here was the ability for those who didn't have the means to keep themselves warm, didn't have means to build shelter, didn't have food, they could go through the fields and actually harvest food for themselves. They have to work at it, but they could harvest food for themselves, and they could go to a storehouse of a place where they could get wool, which they could weave into clothing, and also wood, which they could build a shelter and a fire. And so that was a way of taking care of those who did not have the means to take care of themselves, so long as those who were in need were also willing to engage in their own livelihood. And the problem now, of course, is there is no temple storehouse, and there's no one administering a storehouse on the Torah's principles. So at this point, there is no basis for a tithe. Does that answer your question, Jaime, or do you have a comment on any of that?
Yeah, let me answer that. Okay, then my question would be then is, okay, like for example ourselves, I'm in a very small congregation here in Medellin. Okay, we're 5 families. We'd like to get a building down the road where it's called honor Shabbat, et cetera, and all that kind of stuff like that. How is that financed or paid for, so to speak? Because actually, no Roy is going to be able to handle that on their own. All those costs,
right?
Sure. Et cetera, sure. So are we supposed to have that type of a keilah? Or personally, I would operate out of someone's home and invite those who come to the home to do potluck and provide what is necessary, and whoever is most engaged in terms of studying Yah's testimony to present teaching at the meeting, but that the food would be provided collectively, and that I would have do it in someone's home. I also find that because of the fact that there are so many buildings in a community that are not used on the Shabbat from Friday evening to Saturday, that there's always the opportunity to use a building and not have to actually build one. So I think there's lots of ways to go about that, but there's nothing that precludes an individual from investing and sharing Yah's message. Over the years, hosting the various sites that present the books that I have written and giving them away free, as well as the cost of actually making this program possible. It's years and years and years I've invested many hundreds of thousands of dollars in trying to share this message. I've never received anything back from that investment other than the satisfaction that there are many people who have come to know Yah as a result of it, and that's more than good enough for me. So, there are opportunities to invest in the proclamation of Yahweh's message. And I would encourage folks to do that, but is there a requirement to tithe? No. And are you going to find justification for it? No. Okay, I understand that. Now, let me ask you in relation to heaven and hell, which I know you've talked about previously.
Sure.
Okay, and I understand, I was listening to last week, I think you brought it up, that there's like a black hole, so to speak.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, in which people who that are classified in a certain way go there, and they actually live there in eternity. There's not an actual suffering type thing of fire and things like that.
That's correct.
But they are cognizant. The mental facilities, faculties are cognizant and everything, and they're basically there in this black hole forever alone for eternity, and knowing that they basically didn't enter into the reign of Yahweh.
Here's there's three choices that we have for destination for a human soul. The consciousness that you speak of is simply the soul. The soul is the same. If you were to use the word consciousness, which is the animal awareness of our surroundings and ability to respond to our surroundings, that awareness is the basis of the Hebrew word nephesh, soul. There are three destinations for human souls. Those who understand who Yahweh is, come to know him, come to like him for who he actually is as he presents himself in his Torah, who come to know and understand the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant and act upon them, that those souls are promised by Yahweh 5 benefits, and of those 5 benefits there is eternal life, there is perfection, there is adoption into his family, there is enrichment and empowerment, and we get to camp out with God, if you will, for all eternity. That is the best by far option for a human soul. Now, those who do not know Yahweh, they've been beguiled by religion. They've been led astray by the media. They've been led astray by politics. They have either created an illusionary God and a religion that is based on some profession of faith, that those who have been victimized by politics and religion, that upon their earthly demise, their mortal demise, their soul simply ceases to exist. There is no punishment for them, no hell, no nothing. It's just that they had their life. They were given a mortal existence. They were given free will. They were given a nasama, the seat of judgment, to make a discriminating choice. But they squandered all of that. And so at the end of their existence, they cease to exist.
So they don't look at that black.
No. And if they did, then God would be sadistic. You would not want to spend your eternity with a God that says, you will either come to know me and love me, or I will see to it that you will be tormented forever. That is the Christian God, and the Christian God is sadistic. So no, the vast 99.999% of human souls just simply cease to exist upon their earthly demise. There is no punishment for them. There is no reward for them. They had their opportunity, squandered the opportunity for whatever reason, and there is no heaven, there is no Sheol, which is the actual word instead of hell. Now, there has to be a consequence, however, and a punishment, if you will, for those who have deliberately led souls astray, who have led them away from God. It's one thing to be a victim. It's another thing to be a victimizer. We don't punish the victims of pedophilia, but we do hold the pedophiles accountable. Well, God does the same thing in terms of religion and politics. If you are a deceiver and your actions lead to the death and destruction of souls because of what you are promoting, what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're advancing, then God's going to hold you accountable. You will be judged. And if you are judged, then you're going to go off to Sheol. Now, Yahowah spends a lot of time describing this so that people are aware of what it means to end up being in Sheol. And what it means is that you're assumed to be in league with the demons, and the demons are immortal. Even God cannot kill them. And so what he does is say, all right, you're now become immortal, but you're immortal separated from me. And so he puts them in a place wholly separated from him from all eternity. So they have their consciousness, their soul, and they're in this place of utter darkness where there is no light, where they are constrained, incarcerated, if you will, for all eternity. There's no light, so there can be no fire. There's no torture. There is no one there to abuse them. It's just that they're eternally aware and eternally separated from God. And the best, if you were to take something that we know exists in the universe that would be akin to this, it would be a black hole.
Okay. Okay, so in Revelation, I don't remember if it's 21 or 22:8 or something like that, where it's talking about that those who are fornicators, murderers, etc., will have their second life in the lake of fire with Satan. Yeah. That's talking about the deceivers.
Yeah, there's a number of things that you got to be careful of. First, anything from Revelation 17 on does not exist in any extant witness prior to Constantine creating the Roman Catholic Church. And by the time that Constantine created the Roman Catholic Church in the mid-4th century, textual fidelity, in other words, the reliability of the text changed so radically that you really have to be extraordinarily careful of anything that doesn't have a witness prior to the mid-4th century. And we have no extant manuscript or codex or even piece of parchment or of papyrus of anything after Revelation 17. So you have to be really careful going beyond that. And second, the lake of fire is a metaphor for judgment. There are many metaphors associated with fire. And one of the scriptural metaphors in the context it's being used there is a metaphor for judgment. So you are tested in the fire, you're judged, and if you're judged, you pass through this lake of fire, this concept of judgment. And as you know, water, which makes up lakes, and fire they cannot exist at the same time. So he is by calling it a lake of fire, he's telling you, okay, this is a metaphor. You don't make lakes of fire. This is a metaphor. You pass through judgment, and then you are eternally separated from Yahowah. And that is really the second separation. It's a second life in a way, because it is now eternal life experienced by those who deliberately led people away from Yahowah.
Okay. What you're saying is everything in Revelations from after 17, in other words, starting from 18 to the end, that basically came after Constantinople, the Council of Nicaea, and all that. We
don't know when it was written. This is what we know is that any time you don't have a witness to the text prior to the mid-4th century, around 350 CE, that the text is so universally edited, so doctored, so inconsistent with the older copies that you have to look at everything therein with as suspect. For example, the 8th chapter of Yahowah, where it speaks of the woman who was accused of adultery, and Yahusha is supposedly drawing in the sand and said, "Ye with the who has committed no sin, cast the first stone." Never occurred. Story did not occur. It was made up in the 8th century. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're talking with Jaime, calling in from Medellin, Colombia. And, one of the things that I would share is that, when he talks about what are the eventualities for human souls, he most often mentions the consequence of being misled, because he doesn't want you to be misled by religion and politics. And so he talks about death and destruction. And it's amazing to me that religious individuals are incapable of understanding that eternal damnation and death and destruction are mutually exclusive concepts. And so when God is talking to us about the death and destruction of a soul, he cannot be talking about eternal damnation, eternal separation. And yet they don't seem to get it. And at least, the vast preponderance of his communications are about the extinguishment, the annihilation, the extermination of the soul, because that's the vast majority of people are going to end up in that situation. And second to that is his testimony about, if you embrace the covenant, here's the benefits, one of being eternal life, but with Yahowah. But then he says, I have to be just. I have to hold those who have engaged in religion and politics to mislead others. I've got to hold them accountable, which is why there is a consequence for those engaged in those behaviors. And it's when you look at his testimony, it's all consistent with that. Makes perfect sense. It's as it should be. And now, so what you have is religions trying to convince the people and get them to pay them money, telling them, well, if you make your tithes and offerings and you're part of this organization, then your soul won't go to hell. And that Yeah, exactly. And if you've ever been to a funeral done in a religious community, they're all talking about that individual God wanted, God brought them home. You're going to see them again when you go to heaven. Walk through a cemetery sometime and read the stones. It's all based on the myth of that you're going to be back together again in heaven. And the mythos of religion grew out in large part by trying to make people feel better about death.
Understand. Let me ask you this. Okay.
Yes.
Then, with so many of the, let's just for simplicity's sake, Bibles, even though I don't like to use that word either for the things that you say, that are out there, which do you use? Which do you recommend? Now, I use, for example, one called the Besorah, in which it has all the corrected names, et cetera. It doesn't use God, et cetera. And I also use one that I just got, which is the Hebraic Roots Bible that just came out, which is also, trying to translate from as much of the original as possible, using all the correct names, et cetera.
Yeah. One of the problems that I have here is this. For example, there's a guy that down there in Florida that masquerades as a rabbi, and he has his restoration scriptures, and there's an organization that out of, I think he's even out of Israel, but South Africa, that has their translations where they replace many of the names, some of them accurately, is that, it's better to have the names replaced accurately than inaccurately. Not that they get all of the names right, because they get many of them wrong even then, but there is this, they make the claim that their translations are also improved and accurate, and their translations are neither improved nor are they accurate. And so they're all promoting their own agenda. And so you really get right back to it, which is that with very minimal tools, all of which are free online, you need an interlinear to examine the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. An interlinear is one where you'll have the Hebrew word right above or below the English word. And so you can look up each Hebrew word. Many of them, even online, are interactive, where you can click on the Hebrew word and it'll take you to a lexicon. So you need an interlinear. There are many free online. All you have to do is Google Hebrew English interlinears, and you'll be confronted with a dozen or more that are free online. And then second, you need lexicons or dictionaries. And so your own personal involvement in using an interlinear and lexicons and dictionaries to look up each word is the ultimate way for you to come to know who Yahweh is and understand what he's offering. And the time that you invest doing that, even as you're, untrained at it at the beginning, the more you do it, the better you'll be at it. And the more you do it, the more you'll learn, the more you'll reinforce what you've already learned. In fact, this last concluding thought, Jaime, and then please feel free to call in again on another day. I wrote introtogod.org precisely for the reason of providing the tools and the foundation and the perspective to empower everyone to study Yah's testimony on their own. So introtogod.org is a toolbox specifically to equip you to be able to do this. May Yah bless.